I found a hotel key in our bed and followed the scent. I'm not the sort of man who snoops. That's what I told myself on a Tuesday morning when my hand slid under our sheets and closed around a plastic card that didn't belong in our house, much less in our bed. It was warm from my wife's side, white with a black stripe. On one edge, a gold stem with 3 leaves and the words "The Orchard, welcome back." Welcome back. Eliza was in the shower humming the chorus of a song that always finds its way into car commercials. Steam rolled under the bathroom door as if the house were exhaling. Everything looked familiar. The plant she never remembers to water, the candle on her dresser labeled "Amber plus Skin," the robe hanging from the closet like a promise. The only alien in the room was the card in my palm, and the quiet that opened inside me like an elevator shaft. She told me it was a girls' night. Leela and Joe, wine and bad television. I hadn't questioned it. Eliza is Quicksilver, art director hands, a laugh that turns waiters generous. So when she says she needs a night to talk about bangs and tattoos she'll never get, I hand her my blessing and a ride to the train. But the Orchard was a boutique hotel in Midtown. I knew it because, 3 months ago, we'd gone there for our anniversary and pretended we were new people. We'd eaten room service pancakes at 10 p.m. and fallen asleep with the curtains open so the city could look in and tell us we were doing it right. On the desk, someone had left a red carnation. The stem bled onto the coaster, and Eliza said it looked like a kiss that had forgotten itself. I held the card until my hands sweat around it. The shower cut off. The door opened and there was my wife, hair twisted into something careless, a towel leaving her shoulders bare. She glanced at me, then at my hand, and for a moment her face did a flicker like a film jump, before it smoothed into the version of herself she uses at client dinners. "What's that?" she asked, keeping her voice light enough to float. "A thank you," I said, because I didn't know better words. "From the Orchard." She tightened the towel. "Oh, Leela's boyfriend works near there. He comped us a drink." We ducked in so she could show me the lobby mural. "The mural," I repeated, because the last time we'd been there the only art I remembered was in the mirror. "You look weird, Jamie," she said, stepping closer. She touched my wrist, gentler than the lie between us. "You know my girls' nights are exactly that. Girls' nights." The smile was perfect, like it had been kerned by an intern. I wanted to be the man who believed her. I wanted to be the man who put the card on the dresser, forgot it, and took my wife out for tacos like we said we would. But in that sliver of silence where two versions of you are auditioning for the same role, I felt how the words "welcome back" were heavier than a comped drink. "Eliza," I said carefully, "did you stay there last night?" She tilted her head, a movement I've always loved. "No." The truth, when it arrives, does not always gallop in. Sometimes it drifts to the edge of the roof and waits, patient as weather. I nodded like a husband who hadn't already fallen into the elevator shaft. We made breakfast. She wore one of my old t-shirts and told a story about a designer who had insisted on a logo that looked like a lemon wearing sunglasses. I laughed in the correct places. Her hair smelled like fresh rain and the amber candle. When she kissed me goodbye at the door, her mouth stayed on mine half a beat longer than usual, as if she felt the draft under it. As soon as the latch clicked, the house changed shape. I set the key card on the counter and stared at it the way you stare at a word until it loses meaning. The stripe caught the light. I had a client call at 9 and a coffee date with a friend who keeps reminding me to start running again. I canceled both. I told myself that if you were going to accuse a person of breaking a bone inside your life, you owed it to both of you to be certain which bone, and how long ago it had fractured, and whether it had been hinted at with that first dull ache you ignored. I called the orchard. I told the concierge I'd found a card in a cab and I wanted to see if they could match it to a room, maybe get it back to the right person. Of course, she said, sweet and efficient. What's the number on the back? There was no number on the back, just the leaf and the welcome. The woman hesitated. It's probably one of our generic reissues. It could be any of the last 20. I'm sorry, I can't pull a name. I understand, I lied. I put on a jacket and walked to Midtown because moving my body made me feel less like I lived in a snow globe. The hotel lobby smelled like polished wood and a decision. The mural Eliza had mentioned was a series of leaves in gold and charcoal, the stems bending toward one another like they were about to confess. At the bar, a woman with a tight black dress and a laugh that tinkled like glass said, "We open at noon." "What time is it?" I asked, even though the lobby clock told me it was barely 11. "Almost noon," she said, and gave me a smile that had clearly rehearsed in front of a mirror. "If you're meeting someone, you're early." "I'm meeting a truth that hates being late," I said, because that was safer than saying my wife in a room like this. The bartender had the kind of jaw that talks you into top-shelf liquor. He polished a glass and looked at me like I was a familiar sort of trouble. "You waiting for Laura?" he asked, casual, as if the hotel kept a roster of Lauras for the convenience of lonely men. "Eliza," I said before I could stop myself. He tilted his head. "She's usually with a guy who orders rye and calls everyone chief. Tall, expensive watch." I wondered what kind of laugh I made when I meant to be agreeable and landed on pathetic. "Of course she is." The bartender's mouth softened. "Look, man, this place is a magnet for people making weird choices in beautiful rooms. I don't know who Eliza is to you, but nobody leaves here feeling like a hero." I ordered water. My hands shook enough to make the ice ring like tiny bells. I sat on a leather stool that had opinions about posture and watched the elevator doors close on strangers. At 12:17, the doors opened and my wife walked out with a man who deserved to be the villain in a movie that still ends well for him. He was tall in that way that makes other men stand up straighter, his suit the color of midnight cars, his hand familiar with the small of my wife's back. Eliza saw me first. For a second, she was a bird remembering it had wings. Then she was my wife again, crossing the lobby with a soft, determined face that made me want to sit down and also run. "Jamie," she said, as if she'd spotted me in a grocery store aisle, "what are you doing here?" "Project near Bryant Park," I said. "You?" The man with the watch extended a hand like he'd practiced gratitude in a parking lot. "I'm Luca," he said. "We were just finishing a meeting." I shook his hand. I could feel the place on my palm where the key card had been this morning. "I don't care what you call it," I said, and heard how tired I sounded. Something in Luca's posture cooled. He looked at Eliza. She looked at me. The lobby's air went silk-thin. The bartender pretended to buff the same glass with the devotion of a monk. "Can we talk somewhere not named after fruit?" I said. We found a corner where a fig tree did its best impression of a wall. Eliza lowered herself into the chair like she was entering water too soon after lunch. "How long?" I asked. I said it softly because yelling would have felt like we were auditioning for a part I didn't want. "A month," she said, meeting my eyes like she had owed me that present for years. It hasn't been," she stopped. She didn't reach for a prettier word. "I'm sorry." The fig tree made a sound like rain, or maybe that was me shaking. I had known, somewhere under my ribs, but knowing is a flashlight and seeing is the sun. "Why him?" I asked, because part of me wanted to inventory the damage. "He makes everything feel urgent," she said. Like the world is a door that needs to be opened now or it'll disappear. I liked being looked at like I was the door. Was, I said. She winced. Is, she corrected. Jamie, I don't have a speech. I have. I have a string of moments I should have cut sooner. I have 1,000 times I could have reached for you and didn't because I was afraid you'd think less of the parts of me that are messy. I married your mess, I said. It's my favorite room in the house. She laughed, but it was made of glass. I know, and somehow that made it harder to bring you this particular broken piece. Luca hovered a polite distance away, pretending to be a man reading his phone who had not just walked out of an elevator with someone else's vows on his suit jacket. The bartender set down my water without being asked. The thin lemon slice rode a ridge of bubbles like it was fleeing. I followed the scent, I admitted. Your candle, the key. I told myself I was being careful with us. Eliza touched the table with her fingertips, as if testing whether it was real. You're allowed to be hurt, she said. You don't have to be clever about it. Clever keeps my hands from shaking, I said. She leaned toward me, and in that small movement there was something erotic in the old, safe way. Her mouth a little open, her breath the heat I knew from 1,000 times we turned off the lamps and let the city do the lighting. My body remembered her before my mind got permission. I didn't come here to write a new story, she said. I came here because I forgot the old one needed more pages. Are we done? I asked. The word felt like an elevator that never arrives. Tears climbed her eyes and didn't fall. She shook her head, once, like a vow renewed without ceremony. If you'll have me, I want to come home and tell you everything that is simple and everything that is not. I want to tell Luca to go find someone who likes doors more than houses. Behind us, his name carried on the room's air like a note had just been struck. He glanced up. He is, I realized, the kind of man who ruins on a schedule. Meticulous. Efficient. He would continue ruining until a better offer flickered on a different floor. Go tell him, I said, and heard the steadiness returning to my voice like a ship finding shore. Then we'll start with the part where I'm furious and you're scared, and we still manage to take out the trash together. She stood. For a moment, in the movement of her hand as she gathered her bag, I saw the woman who had danced in our kitchen wearing my shirt and a pair of socks she'd sworn were lucky. She crossed the lobby and spoke to Luca. He tried to smile like a man in a commercial learning a lesson about integrity. He reached for her elbow. She moved it away with the kind of grace that makes a room respect you. 30 seconds later, he left with a shrug that cost him nothing. Eliza came back to the fig tree and sat. I told him there's a door he doesn't get to open, she said. She looked at me the way people look at the first sky after a storm. Jamie, I'm not asking to be forgiven in one sitting. I'm asking for a chance to be the person who remembers the shape of our life from the inside. I wanted to kiss her and I wanted to make her feel the cold edge of every night I'd spent not knowing. Instead, I reached across the table and laced my fingers through hers. The contact was a soft flare. My body, traitor and ally, leaned into the heat. Even in a room like this, where desire felt like a staged whisper, touching her was a homecoming the city couldn't choreograph. We walked out together. On the sidewalk, the world seemed to have turned up its color. Taxis burned yellow. A woman in a red coat laughed into a phone, and the sound was a ribbon. Eliza slipped her arm through mine as if the last month were a wrinkle we could press smooth with enough patience. On the train home, no one looked at us. The subway is the great mercy. It lets you be unremarkable when you need it most. Eliza rested her head on my shoulder. I could feel the tiny tremors in her jaw, the way apology shakes through you even when you're sitting still. My hand found the underside of her wrist and settled there, where the pulse confesses. At our stop, we climbed the stairs into a sky that had found its blue again. The apartment smelled like coffee and the ghost of the candle. In the kitchen, I set the orchard key on the counter between us like a centerpiece from a party that had gone too late. "I'm not going to ask for details," I said. "Not the kind that turn love into a police report. But I am going to ask you to tell me when the wanting started, because maybe that's where we fix it." She leaned on the counter, hair falling forward in a way that used to distract me and still did. "It started when I felt boring to myself," she said. "When we were both so good that we forgot to be urgent." She looked up, and the erotic part of the moment wasn't the tilt of her mouth or the memory of her body. It was the way her vulnerability filled the room and made the air warm. "I want to be urgent with you," she said. I stepped around the counter and pulled her in. The kiss was not a firework. It was a breath we'd been holding too long finally going where it was supposed to. Her hand slid up my back with a familiarity that undid me. We held each other in the kitchen, not performing for anyone, not trying to be clever. If there were a camera, YouTube would let it roll. Two adults deciding not to let a hotel lobby be the loudest room in their marriage. We didn't make promises we couldn't keep. We made coffee. We made a list, no, not a list, a murmur of small things we would do to drag urgency into the daylight. Tuesday night walks without our phones, kissing when we pass in the hallway, saying what we want when we want it even if the sentence is clumsy. We didn't call it rebuilding. That sounded like a reality show. We called it what it was, coming home over and over until home recognized us again. When the afternoon softened, Eliza pulled the amber candle from the shelf and lit it. The scent threaded the rooms. She took the hotel key and slid it into a drawer, not hidden, but away, like a stubborn lesson you finally learned. "Do you forgive me?" she asked later on the couch, her legs tucked under her the way she sits when she's about to confess something ordinary and bright. "Not yet," I said, and then kissed her temple. "But I want to. And right now, I want you to lie on my chest and tell me about the mural again, only this time I'm the one in the picture." She laughed, softer now. She climbed into me like a place she'd missed. The city went on outside with its elevators and key cards and doors that prefer to be opened urgently. Inside, in the small apartment that smells like coffee and contrition, my wife traced slow circles on my wrist. The erotic part wasn't the heat. It was the future nudging closer, asking if it could have a seat. We made room. We turned toward each other, and the world, polite for once, turned its eyes away.